Come, let us never struggle again with breathing meditation. Together, let us relaxingly recite. As we explored in an earlier chapter, confusing concentration for mindfulness is a mistake that could fatigue our prefrontal cortex, increase our vulnerability to the symptoms of depression, trigger our amygdala, and increase our anxiety as well as aggression. This confusion is compounded by folks who mistranslate anapanasati as mindfulness of breathing instead of mindfulness with breathing. Yes, this could sound like a trifling picayune. But upon deeper examination, its importance is revealed. The phrase mindfulness of breathing infers that mindfulness is actually concentration, which it most certainly is not. Whereas the phrase mindfulness with breathing, and the sixth enlightenment factor, infer that every time our breath coalesces in our lungs, our autonomic nervous system notices, vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. You know, I think I might have missed something that's important. Yes, let's go over here. Let's go over here. Let's add a colon. Okay, let's try this again. And here we go. Okay. Let's hit home and hit bullet. And we're going to delete this and this. It's a mistake that could fatigue our prefrontal cortex, increase our vulnerability to the symptoms of depression, trigger our amygdala, and increase our anxiety. Whoopsie. As well as aggression. All right, let's continue. And whereas the phrase mindfulness with breathing along with the sixth enlightenment factor infers that every time our breath coalesces in our lungs, our autonomic nervous system notices vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. Control. Okay. Once we move beyond the title of the discourse, a careful study of the fifth and sixth enlightenment factors infers. Whoops. During each inhalation, our parasympathetic nervous system is wired to physically relax and mentally release to such a degree that that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, and less defining. The question is not one of doctrinal detail, but whether a technique is impotent or effective. And whether one remains stuck or is liberated at long last. This is why the Buddha taught mindfulness and meditation. Having completed our opening lesson, it's time for us to shift gears. It is Yoda Monday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is the Dzogchen Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I have harnessed my autistic special interests as well as my ADHD hyperfocus to spend about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that I can become your personal, nerdy, neurodivergent guide to nirvana. Welcome, my friends, to meditate like a Jedi. What the hell is this over here? Welcome, my friends, to meditate like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. For the remainder of this live stream, let's play with the latest iteration of very easy meditation practice text, or sadhana, if you're nasty. Sturgeon's Law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks. What could that... yes, even meditation teachers. What could that suckiness look like? It looks like folks forsaking the path of Yin's spiritual matriarchy, choosing not to be flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind, and instead enthusiastically embracing Yang's religious or irreligious patriarchy, enthusiastically embracing being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. Therefore, it could come as little surprise that the majority of teachers implore us to actively focus and actively analyze. Now, the only way to do those things is to rely upon discrete neural pathways, such as those found in the medial and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. The problem is that over-reliance upon the front of our brain could so fatigue us that we present with symptoms of depression, no less trigger our amygdala, the seat of the anxiety and aggression that are antithetical to the peace and the love that many people make life worth living. Good news. Neither the prefrontal cortex nor the amygdala constitute the entirety of the central nervous system. Case in point, every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access the sympathetic nervous system ensconced within the middle third of our spinal cord. This bad boy has evolved to help us to notice, which is completely opposite of the rigidity and controlling tendencies of concentration. This noticing is to be done in a manner that is vulnerable, passive, visceral, random, and fleeting. However, every time we exhale, we've evolved to automatically access the parasympathetic nervous system, divided between the lower third and the upper third of that same spinal cord. This parasympathetic nervous system supports both physical relaxation and mental release, to the point that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, and less defining. And so it's simple. Evolution has already wired us to notice and relax in harmony with the phases of breath. The question is, will we cooperate with our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, or compete against them? Competing against them will give us focus, analysis, depression, anxiety, and aggression. Cooperating with our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system could calm our anxiety, could calm our aggression, could stimulate our anterior cingulate gyrus, the seat of empathy. Sounds great. How do we do it? How do we do it passively? Remember, we don't have to force ourselves to notice. That's automatic. We don't have to force ourselves to relax. That's automatic. How do we do it passively? Through the magic of words. Every time we inhale, we could silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this, thus aligning our will with our sympathetic nervous system. Every time we exhale, we could silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb ease, thus aligning our will with the wiring of our parasympathetic nervous system. And so, what is the liberation the Buddha offers us? Liberation from the habit of living in self-destructive competition. A wonderful example of the elitism of patriarchy is the myth we've been force-fed that one must master the full lotus position in order to meditate. But the Buddha never taught that. And most of us just don't have the flexibility for that without injuring ourselves. But here's the cool thing. When you look at the most ancient Buddhist statuary, the Buddha is depicted, whether he's called Gautama or Shakyamuni, the Buddha is depicted as sitting not in the full lotus posture, but in the quarter lotus posture. The knees are hinge joints, and they're dealt with mercifully, for it's the hips that are ball joints, and it's from there that we turn everything out. Even twisting our feet so that the backs of our feet rest against the floor in a manner similar to that of twisting our forearms. The first time we try to assume this posture, it will most likely be ungainly and asymmetrical, and that's okay. We never want to force our joints. It always ends in tears. We sit as best we can for as little as 5 minutes once every 12 hours or so. And within a week or so, our body could surprise us with a newfound range of motion. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist philosophy or meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window. I'll check for questions approximately once every 15 minutes or so. Let's dig in. There are well-meaning members of patriarchy who would tell you that the path of enlightenment is an arduous quest whose duration could exceed the lifespan of the universe. Apparently, Buddha never got that note, because in the penultimate passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha taught that one could master his path in as little as 7 days. We're already wired to lie down and sit and stand and walk. And there are times when we do that, when we can just chill. We can just cooperate with our autonomic nervous system in a way that helps us drink deep of the peace and the love that is our birthright. It's just that simple. Anyone who tells you otherwise, is trying to sell you something. I'm selling you nothing. These live streams are free. You can download my latest drafts of the PDFs I'm writing for free, all the time. I'm trying to sell you nothing. I'm chronically ill, quite disabled. There are times I can only lie down. There are times lying down is too painful, so I have to circulate through a bunch of different postures, trying to find not necessarily the most comfortable, but the least painful in that moment. I don't tell you that for pity, but just to let you know that our body is always going to want to do different things. Sometimes it'll want to sit, sometimes it'll want to lay, sometimes it'll want to stand, sometimes it'll want to walk. The path of enlightenment is paved with working with our body, with working with its needs of the moment in the most empowered way. So there'll be times when you can lie down and read a book, or lie down and watch TV, or lie down and meditate, and so forth and so on. There'll be other times when you can do those same things sitting or standing or walking. Remember, we're not concentrating, we're just cooperating with the natural functions of our autonomic nervous system, in harmony with our body and our breathing and our brain. There have been times when I've made the mistake of trying to force concentration, or plunged into the deep end of the pool of anxiety, because the relaxation I was experiencing was subtle and not gross. Or perhaps I should use the word coarse. I'm very grateful I was given the insight that it's not my job to force relaxation or to force awareness or to evaluate the intensity of those things. It's just my job to cooperate with the autonomic nervous system in a manner as simple as it is effective. How do we know it's effective? By a reaction to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Can we feel the full spectrum of emotions without those emotions controlling our choices and our utterances and our deeds? Can we feel cranky without being petulant or cruel or destructive? And of course, the same holds true for every emotion. It's not a question of suppressing, it's a question of simply being a conduit of experience. When I was a kid in the early 70s, late 60s, there was something, I think it was called a water wiggle. And you would screw it onto the end of your hose, turn the hose on, and the hose would wiggle about and promptly punch you in the face. It should have been called aquatic black eye. And when we fight our autonomic nervous system, we're pretty much an interpersonal water wiggle of death. However, we can always unscrew the water wiggle and just allow the hose to return to its factory settings of merely being a conduit. And when we do that, it is benign. Similarly, the more we cooperate with our autonomic nervous system, the less harm we will do as we walk through life. as we stroll down this ever-narrowing and oh too finite conveyor belt of life. As children, we look at adults and say, oh, I'll never be that way. And then we get older and we learn that even though we're big and we're tall, we don't have all the answers. And we don't even always know how to be kind. We don't always know how to be good. And so sometimes just remembering that the epitome of morality is simply nonviolence. Nonviolence of intention, or I should say nonviolence of intention, nonviolence of utterance, nonviolence of deed. And that might not sound like a lot, but there are times when that is epic. And this can help. There is lots of misunderstanding about going with the flow. Going with the flow is about spontaneity, but let us pretend there were two flavors of spontaneity. One is scattered, the other is centered. Choose love's centered spontaneity, and you will be surprised at the good you do as we stumble through life. Very few people choose to be villains. Most are just conditioned towards villainy. Most do not choose yang, they're just conditioned to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. But some of us are lucky enough to yearn for something better, to yearn to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. And we find that being that way is less of a destination and more of a journey. It sets us in the minority, but it's a discomfort well worth it. here in the swamp of late-stage capitalism, it can be difficult to lovingly go with the flow from a place of centered spontaneity. When society actively punishes those who do not fall into line with being rigid and fearful and squandering their days, picking up crumbs. In Tibet, in China, in India, in Udayana, contemporary Pakistan, contemplatives sometimes lived as solitary yogis or semi-solitary yogis, begging for a meal and living in the wilderness. In the contemporary world, most countries have created a scenario wherein every square inch is owned by an entity, including the government, which means the homeless are seen as trespassers and are often imprisoned. And with the threat of homelessness, with the threat of medical needs unmet, people become wage slaves. And so it can be very frightening and very scary to choose peace and choose love. But cinema and song and literature and poetry warn us that the alternative is unbearable. One of the American existentialists wrote, people lead lives of quiet desperation. Life could be much more than that. We do not sit in proper posture out of fear that some self-important cranky person will scold us or strike us if we have experience in a zendo. We sit in proper posture because it's sustainable. It's most comfortable. it's most empowering. Yesterday mid-morning, I sat on the front lawn in close proximity to the sidewalk so that I could pet passing dogs, going on walks with their pet humans. An individual said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to break your concentration." Mindfulness is not concentration. Concentration is a duality where things can disrupt it. But just noticing is something we're already wired to do every time we breathe in. To do so vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. Therefore, any sound, any sight, any sensation, any flavor, any scent is just part of the experience. Any emotion, any intention, any thought, any memory, any imagining is just par for the course. The great Buddhist reformer Prahe of Pakistan many centuries ago taught that by relaxing into our exhalation, whatever happiness or sorrow we notice during our inhalation can melt into the simplicity of just emotion. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever hate or love we notice during our previous inhalation can melt into the simplicity of just intention. And so the only morality is cooperating with our autonomic nervous system and flowing with the love that is the effortless byproduct thereof. Love, we find, is more than an emotion. And simply, it's an intention to be kind, to wish kindly, to speak kindly, to behave kindly, even to do commerce kindly. And those four bases of mindfulness constitute the second through fifth folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. Many a Zen student has puffed up their chest and said, "I'm really emphasizing training in morality." If you have to train it, it's a contrivance. The test of our meditation is not the presence or absence of thoughts or emotions. It's the difficulty or ease with which we can be kind. Consider the film The Big Lebowski. Consider the contrast between The Big Lebowski and the dude. The Big Lebowski was very, very wealthy and very, very cranky, and the dude was neither. According to Lao Tzu, the author of the Tao Te Ching, the key to being a Taoist sage is not scholastic accomplishment nor yogic asceticism. It's simply mastery, lovingly going with the flow. For he explains that the three treasures of the Tao are simplicity, patience, and compassion. Some of us were raised in a Christian worldview, and that's great. That can be useful. And when one reads the first episode of John, one comes across two very poignant concepts. The first is that love and fear are antithetical. The second is that God is love. That means that if we think we're being led by the Spirit, but that Spirit makes us fearful or anxious or domineering, then remember the Spirit of God is not a fearful spirit. It's a loving spirit. And love is not controlling. When we feel the need to be controlling, when we feel the terror, when we feel controlled by our fears, we are not in the Spirit. Though we might speak in language pious and sanctimonious. For those of us who are atheistic or just very rational and believe more in science than mythology, that's fine. There is a antithetical relationship between our anterior cingulate gyrus of love and our amygdala of fear and aggression. It's an on-off switch, if you will, a toggle switch. And the mastery, the key to accessing, to liberating ourselves from not the presence of the amygdala, it's a useful tool, but the tyranny of the amygdala is not focus, it's not analysis, it's merely awareness and release. We all have controlling tendencies. Sometimes I get impatient with my disabilities, and I try to increase my energy. That type of contrivance either makes me cranky or anxious. In the long term, it is more beneficial to cooperate with my body rather than strive to control it. It would be wonderful if you could learn that the easy way rather than the hard way that I've had to learn it. Many people are concerned that going with the flow is the folly of blind faith. However, the great genius Albert Einstein taught that although competency with the sciences was important, it wasn't sufficient. That once our brain had learned the rudiments and the lofty pinnacles of whatever arts or sciences speak to us, it's just the raw materials. And there is plenty of room for creativity, which comes from peace, which comes from spontaneity. When we read the biographies of many Nobel laureates, we see a pattern. Intelligent people hitting a wall, walking away from a problem, resting or sleeping, and then the solution comes to them. A late friend of mine once had 2 cats, his cat and his wife's cat. And one time she was screaming at his cat to get out from under the couch, and she sincerely thought that she could persuade his cat to come out from hiding under the couch by screeching and swiping at it with the handle of a broom. My late friend, before he was late, proposed a different idea. So his wife stopped screeching and stopped swiping at the cat with the broom handle. And he dramatically, theatrically strode across the living room towards the kitchen, rifled around in the cabinet, used the electric can opener to open a can of tuna, and you guessed it, the cat came running into the kitchen from its hiding place. How wonderful if life solutions could likewise come to us. The inaction mentioned in the Tao Te Ching is not literal, but figurative. We still make choices, we still make utterances, we still do perform actions, but those actions are not from fear or desire or agenda. They're the product of love's centered spontaneity. When we feel an unpleasant emotion, it is not our job to justify it or to lambast it. It's not our job to repress it or indulge it. It's our job to notice and relax in harmony with our inhalation and exhalation. And in time, we can find that negative emotion is just an emotion. That unpleasant sensation is just a sensation. The desire to shove it away is just an emotion. It's just an impulse. It's just a physical sensation. This is not a question of philosophizing. This is not a question of belief. It's simply a question of noticing and relaxing in harmony with our autonomic nervous system and the cycles of our breath. Few things are as efficient at squandering our peace and our energy and our time as trying to win the favor of fiends and fools. We evolved in such a way as to be empathetic and cooperative. And so it's understandable we are drawn in that direction. But better to notice it and release it than be controlled by it. Perhaps that is why it is taught in the Dhammapada that it's better to walk the path alone than in the company of a fool. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 11 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class as well as group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.